Hello, all. We still have some people signing in here. We have again Frank. Frank doing a presentation on SQF. Frank works as a representative of SQF. And yet last week he did a webinar on small companies starting up with SQF. And this week he's going to focus specifically on food safety culture and the SQF code. And we're still getting some people signing in here. And we're going to start probably within the next 30 seconds or so. But yeah, so Frank is going to talk specifically about SQF on for food safety culture. And Frank, why don't you start and kind of talk about yourself while more and more people are joining in here?
Yeah, sure, Matt. Be glad to. So, yeah, for those of you on the webinar that don't know me, as Matt indicated, I am a technical and marketing and sales representative for SQF. I have been in the food industry for a long time. Let's just leave it at that. And past roles have been I've worked in manufacturing as in the quality areas and supplier management areas. I've worked as an auditor, as a consultant, as a trainer. I ran a training organization. I ran a certification body. And so now I spend a lot of my time training auditors for SQF, doing presentations like this, rewriting code, working with standards, and continuing with trying to get messaging out on food safety management systems and the benefits and returns that organizations get from having those certified or at least in place and compliant to them.
Yeah, well, I think we still have some people showing up, but we've gotten I think a lot of people here. So just kind of a little bit of house maintenance here. If you have any question, Frank loves to kind of have this be a dialogue. So if you have any question as we're going along, go to the chat section and go ahead and type in your question, and we'll be able to answer that. I'll ask it while we're going to keep it kind of fresh. Frank is definitely being modest. I've known Frank for a long time. In fact, at one point in time, we were competitors when he was at Guelph. But you basically ran Guelph, right? A lot of the stuff there.
Yeah, a lot of the services. Yeah, it was a certification body, consultancy, training organization with some product development stuff. So yeah.
And then to NSF, correct? When NSF bought Guelph.
Yeah, that was merged with NSF a number of years ago. Correct. Yep.
Yeah. And so we at WQS like to have you in this role, and as the SQF representative, because you are great as an SQF representative because you understand all the different aspects of the industry, from being an industry yourself and also being in the CB world yourself as an auditor and consultant. You kind of understand everything, and so you have a lot more input, and I love being able to talk to you about stuff because you come across it in a multi-dimensional way. So right now, guys, if you have any questions, it's the perfect time to ask them because he will be able to answer questions in again a multi-dimensional way. From Train to Comply and WQS, we welcome you, Frank. Why don't you go ahead and start with your presentation? Frank's camera is not working, so I'll come on whenever there's a question I ask. But other than that, I'm just going to turn my camera off.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. And again, apologies for the webcam not providing that. But anyways, you can see my mugshot if you want. It's down below, and you can get me on LinkedIn too if any of you want to link in with me. So let's start with this topic on food safety culture and the SQF code. Just to start off with, the SQF code and other certifications that are out there don't actually say thou shalt must have a food safety culture. A culture is pretty much what you make it. And so the intent of this presentation was to give you a clear kind of a little bit of a definition of culture, and a model. There are many models out there and many ways to measure food safety culture, in keeping with some of the material I presented last week around small suppliers and the link to the Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI. I'm going to be using primarily their model, which I'll give you a link to their full model at the end of this presentation that you could go and look. I think it's from model's perspective, it's simple. It's not too many steps, and I'll give you a sense of the types of questions that you should be asking yourself or your employees to give a sense of basically how things are going. How do employees view food safety? How does management view food safety? What are you doing? How are you getting better? Within the food safety SQF code, there is a requirement for continuous improvement. And so the food safety culture and management's embrace of that is shown in many ways. And so at the end of this presentation, I'll go over a couple of requirements in the code that don't necessarily say food safety culture, but speak to some of the things that we're going to be talking about in the within the model of food safety culture. So what is food safety culture? This again comes from the definition by GFSI. It is shared values, beliefs, and norms that affect mindset and behavior towards food safety across and throughout an organization. So, again, values, beliefs, and norms, how do you measure that? How do you know that everybody is on the same page? Obviously, knowledge on food safety knowledge is going to be different amongst management, the SQF practitioners, HACCP team, people on the floor. But there should be some core values and understanding of food safety. And then and they need to be shared to be effective across the organization and effective in moving an organization forward on food safety. So let's keep that definition in mind as we move forward. A food safety culture connects an organization. So these are silos, if you know the farm industry. When they're not connected, they do, on a farm organization, they may store separate different grains and be totally separate from each other. But when you connect them, as you might connect the various functions within an organization, and these are typical functions within a food organization. You got purchasing, you got marketing, you got sales, and you got operations. And most of you are probably coming from the operations side. But you have all these functions that are moving forward with different roles, responsibilities, but they should all be following a similar strategy. And that typically is a business strategy, whether it's to make X amount of money, to grow exponentially, to acquire, whatever the strategy might be, number of new products. Overseeing all that, food safety, which is, an important part of any sort of risk mitigation, and understanding that food safety in your organization is an important element. And you want all these silos to be talking to each other, or at least understanding each other relative to their roles. So food safety culture connects, or can connect, all of those different silos. You may have 10 silos rather than 4. Whatever you have, food safety culture, when executed and understood properly within your food safety management system, is a great connector to achieving what you need to. It improves the process. This is a diagram, if you're familiar with Dr. Deming and his Plan, Do, Check, Act model, which is a very simple continuous improvement model that I would encourage you all to learn about and embrace. Food safety culture, it helps improve that process. As you measure it, as you understand it and improve it, make changes to it. Every time you make changes to either your food safety plan, or you learn something about food safety incidents in the marketplace that might affect your HACCP plan or your risk mitigation strategies, you can plan, you can find out about it. You can implement those changes in your organization. You can check on how they're doing, act on it. And every time you do that, you're improving that process, and you're moving up to another level, as this diagram implements. So culture can do that. It also reduces the barriers to new products, barriers to growth, barriers to new customers, as you get consistency of understanding of food safety, the risks within your organization, and equally important, what you do when something happens. Because we all know there are food safety incidences in the food industry, some bigger, some less within your organizations. They happen. A food safety plan and a food safety system is meant to reduce those from happening, but they're not. It's never considered 100%. There's always a lot of variability in what's happening in a food plant. But with good culture and good understanding of everybody's roles and responsibilities and what you do, you can reduce those barriers and reduce those incidences from happening at your facility. So with all that in mind, with all that food safety culture can do, let's move into that 5-dimension model. These are the five dimensions as outlined by GFSI. So that GFSI food safety culture model was developed by a working group. If you go get the white paper on that from GFSI, you'll see that it's a very much a cross section of all the major players globally. But it is presented in a way that I think will resonate with you. So we're going to go through each of these dimensions, just some top level points in each area that you'll want to consider, and also some questions, anywhere from 2 or 3 to 4 or 5 questions that I will leave you with. We'll comment a little bit, but leave you with thinking about each of these dimensions and how your organization is either dealing with it now, embracing it, ignoring it, or whatever the situation might be, because it's going to be different at every organization, but it needs to fit what you do and how you do it. So let's start with vision and mission. So a corporate vision and mission statements are not shouldn't be unknown to you. They don't need to mention food safety specifically, but I mean, in the first under management commitment for food safety, we do require a food safety policy to be developed and to be posted and be signed by management. So clearly it's something that you want to embrace, but it shouldn't be something that is, taking out of a textbook. It needs to be clear, and more importantly, it does need to align with the rest of the company's strategy, whether that's to be the highest grossing company in this particular sector, or to develop 10 new products every year, whatever the company strategy might be. Food safety needs to align with that. So it's important that senior management and the food safety team embrace that. The direction setting, it helps establish a good food safety culture because it requires that clear vision shared and embedded throughout the organization. So if everybody understands what that is and works towards it, it definitely improves the team concept around food safety and obviously the culture. But that has to be communicated, and the messaging has to be consistently understood. If it's not, then it really doesn't bring much value to the organization. So communication should be clear and concise, and it should be tailored possibly to the different stakeholders that vision is intended to do. So tailoring that is important, as is distributing that messaging throughout the organization.
So this is a good time for that question. And again, for people who just showed up, we had about 10 people show up since we started this presentation. We're going to do question and answer as this goes through. And so whenever you see me pop up, there'll be a question that'll be asked. And so if you have any questions at all, please go to the chat box and ask a question. But there was a question that just got asked about SQF documentation and training verification and how that has changed. And since we are talking about communication and messaging, I thought this would be a good place to put that question. How has that changed with the new version, and what are some insights that you have, with your great knowledge of the standard and different ways of implementing it, that you can see practices for training that fit the new version?
I'm thinking, I don't think if they could be more specifically around training, there really wasn't a lot of changes under the training element. That's, the system element 2.9.
More the documentation on the training. Has that changed?
Not that hasn't changed either. I mean, those are still, you still require, the annual training, the different types of training. If you change, what you train on, topics, if part of the food safety culture change is different types of training, then that training should be embedded within the structure of your training concept now, how you record it, all those sorts of things, training matrix, who gets what. That's still within your realm to define how you want to do it, as long as it's there and as long as you can show that everybody gets the training that they're required to have, whatever you define them needing. There are some bare minimums that have been and always have been in the previous code and are in the new code as well. So hopefully that answered. If there was if there was a specific element of training that's not understood, you can ask again. But I don't think there's anything that's really changed there. So
thank you.
Okay, so continuing on with vision and mission, then let's look at some questions that you could ask, or your senior management can ask. How do your senior leaders engage with food safety? So that's, again, in the code a couple places. How do they do that? Do they set the objectives, which they should? Should they review them, which they should under management review? Are they out on the floor? We're going to talk about walking the talk, that sort of stuff. And senior leaders can be anybody from operations management to general managers to owners. You define senior leaders. Obviously, in the code, we talk about a senior management representative or representatives. You define that, whoever the most senior person is at the site that has responsibility for that site. So how do they engage? Can you define how they're engaged with food safety? How is your messaging used to communicate food safety expectations to all employees? That's part of that, whatever that vision and mission is around food safety. How do you do that? There are obviously the policy statement. It can be part of all training. You can have intranet, that TV in the break room that talks about those number of different ways of messaging that you can employ here. And is your company's vision and mission clearly expressed so that both are understood by all staff? Have you asked staff? Do you understand what that means? And if there's, a clear consensus that no, they don't, perhaps it's because it's written, it's too much. I've been involved in some vision and mission statement, exercises that can go on for days and weeks, and you come up with, a statement, and everybody looks at that and they still don't know what it means. So a couple questions around vision and mission there for you to ask yourself or ask your senior management. So I'll leave them with you on that topic. So let's go on to the people side. So on the people side, we're looking, and these are people, is everybody within the organization? Are there clear roles and responsibilities for food safety? Again, in the code, we talk about those roles. The SQF practitioner is a specific role, and there are specific responsibilities that are required for that. Some of the roles and responsibilities are a more critical component of food safety culture. Everybody that would work at a site would have to have some sort of responsibility for food safety. They come in the morning, they punch in, or they clock in, or whatever they do, or not, but they're there. Do they have their food safety hat on? You're always asking, do they have their Health and Safety Act hat on, because you don't want them to hurt themselves. But do they have their food safety hat on, or their food safety hairnet on, whatever, if you want to use that linkage. So the employee behavior and activities are important. A part of that expressed through their roles and responsibilities. So it's important to establish a formal structure around that, clearly define those elements of that. And that includes, who educates the employees, and how do you reinforce good behavior to create proper governance and metrics. So supervisors have a clear role in that. I think we are a lot of times forgetful of supervisors when including them in decisions around food safety. They're out on the floor all the time. They make a lot of things happen. So we encourage you to include them. And this is where the leaders walk the talk to ensure continuous improvement. That can be done in a number of different ways. Their involvement, as we talked earlier, under vision and mission, with respect to food safety, is a clear walk the talk stuff, and that is something that auditors, as part of the certification audit, are continually looking at. They're continually looking at as they walk the floor and look at the process and talk to employees. They want to see embedded with that how the leaders do that. And then again, the leaders here can be anywhere from that senior manager or management to the supervisors. They're all leaders or lead hands, or whoever might be the lead hand of a sanitation crew is a leader. How do they walk the talk? So all those elements are important in terms of the people side of the food safety culture. So here are some questions. Now, these are questions that any individual should be able to answer these questions. So if you go to the floor, and a lot of times these are types of questions that auditors might ask. They're all within the realm of what an auditor might ask an employee during an interview or a discussion that's happening on the floor during an audit. So one might be, when was the last time you or someone on your team raised a food safety concern? If the answer is never, I wouldn't do that. I don't want to do that. I might get, no one wants to hear about that. So those sorts of attitudes and answers would be concerning because they obviously, when food safety incident happens, you want to act on it quickly without putting blame on anything. They do happen. So we want to have employees understand what a food safety concern might be, what's the hazard that might occur, and then importantly, how you would correct that. How do you contribute to food safety in your organization? So that, again, whoever that employee is, they should be able to answer that's part of their role and responsibilities. This is what I do. This is what I can do. Even if it's just alerting the supervisor to an issue, which is fine. At least they understand what they can do and what they should be doing on a daily basis. When was your last food safety training and what did you learn? Easy, simple question. They should know when they had their food safety training. We're not going to be asked, you're not going to looking for specific dates or whatever. They can say, yeah, I had one last year sometime and we did this and we did this. And so that should be a question that all employees should be able to ask. To what level are people committed and acting in accordance with food safety expectations? That's a tough question. How you define commitment. But you can definitely look at some actions according with food safety expectations. So actions around corrective actions when GMPs aren't working well. Definitely corrective actions on CCPs. They should be very objective and specific. If you deviate from that, that would be a concern to the culture of understanding what a CCP is supposed to do. And then how is your food safety performance measured? It's always a tough one. People hate measuring things. Although I would suggest that you probably have a lot of data and a lot of information that can be measured. You just didn't know how. So would encourage you to look at any of the objectives, and objectives should all the food safety objectives, which are required for management, should be using the SMART acronym. If I can remember what SMART stands for: specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and timely, I think it is. Anyway, so those are, any food safety performance metric or objective should be measured. And so employees should know how that measurement occurs and should be updated on how they're doing and how their organization is doing to those performance measurements. So that would be definitely a goal that, and something like that's measurable could contribute to your understanding of the culture. Obviously, improvements in food safety performance measurement is a good sign of cultural improvements and understanding of food safety throughout the organization. Okay, consistency. Third pillar in the food safety culture model. This refers to aligning food safety priorities with people, technology, and processes. Again, that alignment is an effect for consistency. We want everybody working off the same page, so to speak. And obviously, consistency supports culture. You don't want employees, looking at certain decisions around corrective actions that, especially around food safety, that might have business decisions mixed in there rather than food safety decisions, right? What I mean by that is if there's been a hold of product due to a food safety concern for a certain, maybe CCP deviation, at one time you released it because you did some sampling and you didn't find anything, the next time you would have sent it all to garbage for the same thing. So one was a small hold and one was a big hold. And the big hold, we didn't want to put that all to garbage. It cost too much. Those are inconsistent messaging, and I think sends a bad message to employees when that's inconsistent based on business rather than food safety. So those decisions, actions, and behaviors need to be consistent based on accountability. They need to be consistent based on compliance. Obviously, when you change corrective actions, especially on CCPs, that's not consistent with your HACCP plan, not compliant with your HACCP plan. Need to have some consistent measurement of performance and consistent ways of documentation. So when you're documenting all food safety, you want that consistent documentation. Is a big part of any audit, but the documentation and what you put on there tells, especially around corrective actions, are great tools for learning what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening again. So you want consistency around there.
So where would you document that? Like what type of, I have some different questions here about, about training and stuff and having that conversation, specifically of something going wrong and then having that conversation. And then where would you document that conversation, or where would you document the corrective action? Would you do it in your corrective action processes? What type of things would you do, particularly under issues with an individual?
Yeah, if it's not systemic, I wouldn't necessarily put it into the corrective action protocol. I mean, the corrective action, you have to have a corrective action process for instances that occur, but they should be more on the systemic side rather than individuals. But if there are individual discussions that took place to correct a behavior that wasn't, that may have been contributing to food safety incidents, that should go into the employee's file. That's an appropriate place to do that. I would look at aligning those sorts of compliance types of discussions the same way you do with health and safety. It's a law that you have to have oversight over the health and safety of your employees, and the supervisors are held accountable to that. They can be taken to court on that. So they usually document that well because they want to show that they've done their due diligence in training and educating and communicating with an employee around the safety of how they do the job. Can you not use the same methodology and the same documentation for food safety? I've seen some organizations there was a program called STOP, or there's a program that kind of a coaching log that they have. And again, they basically springboarded from the health and safety requirements and included food safety on that, and it worked quite well. It didn't create more paperwork. It was just using the same sort of functionality that they have. So I would encourage you to look at what you might already be doing around health and safety for an individual and incorporate food safety into that. Okay, so let's a couple questions on consistency. Are you confident that all employees know their responsibilities and are held accountable for their food safety related tasks, and that accountabilities are well connected? Simple question. That again comes down to training, comes down to that communication piece we just talked about. And so a good question to ask yourself about employees and what they're supposed to be doing. How does what you measure around consumer complaints, compliance to procedure, productivity influence your food safety culture? So if you're not measuring anything, well, it's going to be very difficult to show continuous improvement. But all these things, productivity is something we always measure. Complaints we do measure. Compliance to procedures. If the procedures aren't written clearly, obviously that's a root cause analysis on something like that. But all these things and how you measure and the output will influence your food safety culture. So how do you do that? Are your measurements related to volume, efficiency at the expense of food safety measures? Right. So, if you're measuring volume and efficiency, which, hey, if you're in the business of making food and and it's a private organization, you're in the business of making money. It's for a profit. So volume, efficiency, productivity are definitely things that you're going to be measuring, or, you're probably not going to stay in business if you're not doing that well. But do these come at the expense of food safety? There was a number of years ago, there was a big recall out in Western Canada in a meat plant, and some of the analysis of that would indicate that the production volume had increased to the point where employees couldn't keep up with the production volume and all their food safety related tasks at the same time. So there was some skimming of those responsibilities, and it resulted in a recall. So again, back to that alignment. You can't have one at the expense of the other. They do have to work hand in hand. So good question there. Is your documentation designed to support employees' food safety decisions and behaviors? So good question. I think what that question means is not just how you document employee behaviors, but the documentation of employees. So if you require them to, fill out 10 sheets for one activity, chances are that that's not probably going to be done in a consistent way. So keep the design of your documentation and your requirements around decisions and behaviors and how you record that as simple and clear and concise as you can to assist with employees embracing the importance of that, but not at the expense of bogging them down so they're spending half their time filling out papers. Or even at a computer. Just because we do things on a computer doesn't necessarily mean we make them easier. So sometimes we replace one column and one initial with 10 clicks of the mouse, which takes you a lot longer to do. So keep that in mind on anything that you're doing in a system. And last question on that is, are employees engaged in the design and improvement of food safety related protocols and instructions? So when you make changes to procedures, are employees involved in that? They're the ones that are doing it. And most SOPs that are functional, used on a daily basis, or used to reference on a regular basis are usually those that are written and designed by those that are doing the jobs. So consider that when you're looking at engaging employees in what they do and how they do it. Adaptability within the food safety model. Adaptability is the ability to adjust to changes in conditions. As I mentioned earlier, the food safety system is constantly in change and constantly under attack. Not under attack, but it changes. So we have product recalls, we have customer issues all the time. That's why we have a crisis management system for water advisory and floods and hurricanes or whatever else might happening. So when they happen, how adaptable, how prepared is the facility in anticipating it, preparing through. This is why we have mock recalls. We have crisis management scenarios that must be tested on an annual basis. So that we're prepared when we're responding and adapting to that change. So we can learn a lot from these when they happen, and they will happen. I think the ability to learn from them, respond in a both a timely manner, says a lot about the culture of the organization, because it takes time and effort to do that right in advance of all this sort of stuff. And I think that's, we see a lot of issues with this coming out of food safety certifications, where They're not taken seriously. They just think it is something else they have to do. You see product recalls being looked at the same sort of scenarios rather than trying to test themselves on worst case scenarios. So how you do that preparation and responding, I think, says a lot about the culture within organizations. So take a look at that, where you stand with that, and whether you can, improve on that and be ready for those situations. Because when they do happen and you do it well, it says a lot about the organization and its commitment to food safety. Some questions around that. Can you articulate your company's food safety expectations and how they are applied to every decision? Does your strategy enable you to respond quickly and effectively with appropriate oversight to ensure the right decisions are made? There's a lot in that. How to respond quickly, effectively, and the appropriate oversight. Notice it says appropriate, because you define what that is too much, and you'll get bogged down in the nitty gritty, and it won't be effective at all. Too little, and you'll miss things. People will say the wrong things. The wrong decisions will be made. So there's got to be a balance there, given the size of your organization and and the different types of stakeholders that are involved in that. And then how do you anticipate, manage, and respond to change? Learn from the past and prepare for the future. Anytime there's a change or a recall in the marketplace that's specific to your type of industry sector or product, that's a change. And can you learn from that and prepare for the future? And that preparation for the future is basically your hazard analysis and how rigorous it is and how up to date it is. And so that kind of dovetails us into the final pillar of that model, where we look at hazards and risk analysis or risk awareness. So understanding food safety hazards at all levels relative to jobs and roles. I'm not of the opinion, that an auditor is right in going and interviewing an employee on the floor and asking them what your CCPs are or what HACCP means. That doesn't necessarily mean that the employee understands food safety hazards if they don't know what HACCP means. That comes down to just asking what they do, how they do it, what happens if something goes wrong, and if employees can answer honestly and effectively at those things. It tells me a lot about me, if I was the auditor, a lot about understanding those food safety hazards. And they would tell you the food SQF practitioner or whoever you are, whatever your role is at the plant where you're coming from, whether they need more training or more insight on what those food safety hazards are. So you do a hazard analysis as part of your HACCP and food safety plan. And part of that looks at, obviously, the risks and significant risks that are specific to your product and process. How do you educate that throughout the organization? How do you use the metrics? How do you reward people? Are there disciplinary actions when those jobs, roles are not complying and reducing or eliminating or minimizing those risks from happening? And obviously, recognition is an important part. So how do you recognize the organization with food safety? So questions around how do you educate staff to understand why the hazard and risk management controls in their areas, and it talks specifically to their areas, are so important, and what would be the consequences of not following them? So they should know these are hazards, these are risks that we as a HACCP team have put in place, and because when we don't control them, this is what's possible. Employees need to know that so that they can, again, put that food safety hat on and bring their A game to the floor every single day. How do you review your near misses and use this information to drive improvements in your food safety system? Near misses might be, well, it wasn't a CCP, but we had a spill out in the plant, and there was some cross contamination here. We think we got all the product. Maybe we should hold more. So what do we learn from those near misses? Every time there's a food safety incident or possible incident, there's something you can learn from that. And I think looking back at your corrective action processes and root cause analysis, did it work this time? Didn't it work? They tell you a lot about what you've learned, how you've implemented it, and how you can possibly get better. Then can you identify examples of where using industry intelligence has helped identify potential hazards or risks to your business or your process? This is where, keeping a pulse on what's happening in your types of products in your particular sectors, recalls that are happening there, white papers that are put out there, and can you use that, and have you used that to go back to your HACCP plan and update it? You should be doing that on an annual basis as part of your HACCP plan review. There's always change in the food and beverage industry, and sometimes you might have to connect the dots a little bit, even if it's a risk or a recall that has happened outside of your particular sector, but close enough that you might start to question, is it possible here? Things change. Every time there is a major recall, we learn something, and it's important that you learn how that affects your business. So there's some questions for you. Okay, so where does food safety kind of meet the SQF code? The code and the standards, they don't say thou shalt have a food safety culture. Like I said, there's no place in the code does it say that. But it is something that is seen in various, specifically in some particular requirements of the code. But any execution by the site to control a hazard by using and complying to a requirement of the code is part of the culture. How you do that, how you correct it, how you document it, are you consistent in those ways, are you communicated? They're all part of the culture. So when you're getting an audit, an SQF audit, the auditor is assessing that culture on a continuous basis and the commitment to food safety. When we train auditors, we tell them anything under management commitment in section 2.1 or 2.2. Don't even think about trying to complete your assessment of that until the end of the audit, because they're connecting dots to see how certain incidences around food safety that they might see, how they might connect to more of a management commitment and cultural nonconformance, rather than, I saw, a pile of garbage in the corner there. If I saw it in 10 different places, okay, what's that telling me? Is it a problem with sanitation, or is it a problem with employee engagement? If one part of the plant is really clean and another isn't, what's the difference between that? All these questions should be going through an auditor's mind as they're trying to do some root cause analysis and put any nonconformances into a place in that code that is going to be most meaningful to you, the site, and management to improve it. That's ultimately their challenge. So they're also going to be looking at employee actions or non-actions that are true measures of culture. I remember one instance being in a plant. I was doing an audit. I was standing on a platform where we were watching a shop floor and making some product, and all of a sudden water, it was a major thunderstorm outside, and water started coming up through the drains and the sewers. And I just sat there and watched. And basically the non-action of the employees or the incorrect action of the employees at the time was a clear sign to me that they didn't understand where there was risks, that in this case, business volume, getting product out the door was more important than dealing with an incident like this that would happen in a way that would minimize the risk to the product. So as training auditors, we encourage auditors to just sit there and watch what employees do, watch their actions or their non-actions. They say a lot about the measurements of culture. So let's look at some specific code requirements, what auditors look for, and the benefits to sites, and we'll wrap up with those sorts of things as we look at culture. So we're going to be looking at requirements specifically to the code for manufacturing. But these particular management commitments ones are also very similar for primary production, for packaging material code, and for the storage and distribution code as well. That's why I've got a picture of all of those codes on there. Okay, so specifically in the code around management commitment, this isn't verbatim from the code. I've summarized a little bit just so we can get it all on one slide. 2111 number 3 talks about senior management policy statement, outlines the organization's commitment to establish and review food safety objectives. So similar to that vision and mission aspect of the model, there, you do require a policy statement, and you do need to review food safety objectives. So this is one place where an auditor would look at what that policy statement is, where it's located, is it updated? So if it's signed by a senior manager that hasn't been in place for 3 years, what's the value of it? And then really encouraging auditors to look at those food safety objectives. There's no magic number of objectives, but they have to be clear and measurable so that they can be monitored. 2123 talks about senior management shall ensure adequate resources are available. So that's easily seen throughout the site when they're looking at, say, the preventive maintenance program. Can they keep up with all the PMs on food safety? Do the work breakdowns and the production maintenance get higher priority than food safety because of a resource availability? That's just an example of that. We can look at sanitation from a resource perspective. Are they done allocating there? So lots of different resources. Shouldn't be just people too. It's talking about money, the budget for the food safety. All those things are it's a very good catch-all for management walking the talk, so to speak. So 2123 is someplace where auditors can look to see how that's being done. We talked about on the people side in the model about jobs and roles and responsibilities. Well, that's clear under 2128, where we talk about job descriptions with food safety responsibility. Also further in 2112, we also 2125, I believe it is, we talk about obviously the requirements for the SQF practitioner and the senior management allocation of a practitioner. And those roles and responsibilities are clearly laid out. So again, part of that cultural analysis by the auditor in terms of, are those descriptions complete enough? Do those that have an impact on food safety know what they are, and are they doing it properly? And then the 2129, a really important one that talks to that slide I had up earlier around Dr. Deming's continuous improvement model, where we specifically say that senior management shall establish processes to improve the effectiveness of the SQF system to demonstrate continuous improvement. You should always be getting better at what you do. Doesn't mean you need better scores or whatever, but because things happen and those sorts of things. I'm not a big score person, but that improvement can be seen in many different ways. So auditors are really looking for that. How do you do that? And of course, if you're measuring it and you show continuous improvement through that measurement, that's going to go a long ways to satisfying the auditor, but more important, satisfying you that your plant is moving forward with food safety and understanding those aspects. Some other food safety culture related requirements, not necessarily a management commitment. I just pulled a couple of these out. Under 246, we talk about non-conforming product or equipment. The management and disposition of products. Clearly that, again, back to is it a business decision or a food safety decision? Is it being done consistently? The evidence that an auditor can see, and that's, as an auditor, you always say, hey, what was put on hold? Let me look at the documents of that. What are the disposition of the products? Did you get everything? How that's done, how effectively and efficiently that is done says a lot about food safety culture for all those that are involved in that process. Corrective and preventive action, again, resolution, root cause analysis. What have you learned from that? Is it just an activity of putting stuff down on paper, or is it telling you a story, good or bad? That tells, again, an auditor a lot about the culture of the organization and what's happening with that whole corrective and preventative action program. And then product withdrawal and recall, the communications and decision making that happens, not necessarily during an actual recall. I mean, you are going to have documentation on that, but the mock recalls, how complete they are. Are you ready for that? Again, back to that adaptability and being ready for when that recall happens, and what sort of communication and decision making happens in a timely manner and by those that are involved. So again, some areas.
I have a quick question here. Someone asked if you could provide some examples of some continuous improvement measures.
Around food safety, okay, you could look at under sanitation. A lot of times you have to look at the effectiveness of the sanitation. That could be a measurable thing. You may be using ATP analysis on that. You may be using micro. You could look at your pre-ops or your pre-inspection or post-sanitation inspections. How many times have they had to re-clean? Pest control, number of sightings, number of maybe last year you had in September, October, November, you found 10 mice. This year you did a few other things, you put more bait stations outside. Now you had 5. So you can see, so those are all measurables. Those all, if you did something, if you measure it and you did something to improve it, and then remeasure it again, that kind of before and after picture shows improvement, that's continuous improvement. So there's a couple of quick and dirty measurements in there. CCP compliance. Compliance could be, documentation. Is it timely? Is it done correctly? I've seen some plants that have a measurement of, a goal of 95% or 96% compliance on all CCP documentation, and they measure it and they count it. And so there's different ways of doing and retraining to get it better. So cause and effect is something that you put in place, and then but you got to have a before measurement and then an after measurement. So
very good. And then another question was, any suggestion for culture KPIs?
There are some different models out there. We don't support, like, we don't want to come out and say which ones are better than that. Some are measurable, some are simple. I think if you kind of put these questions that are in each of these models here into you can create a survey, and the survey you could have a grading scale of 1 to 5 and how people feel about certain things, and you can do it at time 0 right now. You can look at the results and say, hey, we got to do some training at this level, maybe at our supervisory level, and you do it, then you redo the survey again, and hopefully you get some improvement. So surveys and the KPIs can be, say, hey, you want to get a 10% improvement in our measurement of food safety culture, however you're measuring it. So those are the types of KPIs that you can put in place. The tool that you use, I would encourage you to look in the marketplace for. Some of them are free, some of them you have to pay for, some of them can be online, some of them you can define yourself. There are a number of different ways. I'd keep it simple for now to do that, just because some of them can be complicated and costly too. So depending on the resources you have available, I don't want cost to be a deterrent from that. So if you can keep it simple and start, you can always change the measurement model. There's nothing to say you can't be doing it. Just make sure you know when you've changed it, so that when you measure it again, you're going back from the change, not back to the one you originally started with.
Great, thank you.
Okay, good questions. Yeah, good ones. Yeah. Okay, so what are auditors looking for? Just got a couple minutes here to wrap up. Management responsibility and accountability. That's what you don't want. You want to see management, and what they do to be working what they call above the line. If they're placing blame and holding it's the SQF practitioner's fault that these things aren't working, those are red flags. It's not the SQF practitioner's HACCP plan. It's everybody's HACCP plan. It's management's responsibility to understand the outcome of that plan and to have the resources in place to make sure that it works. So passing the buck is not going to work. Food safety fact decisions rather than business decisions. You've heard me harping on that again and again and again. When I look at HACCP plans, and I have for many, many years, I can tell a lot about how committed they are to the very distinct corrective actions that are in place for a CCP or a CQP if you're doing the quality plan as part of the quality code. They tell me a lot about the commitment to the process of the HACCP process and the outcome of that rather than business decisions. Employee engagement and knowledge, key component. That's why we do interviews. We want to find out what they know, what they don't know, how engaged they are in that process. Employee actions, we're going to watch them, what they do, how they do it, how they record it. We can do that for watching. We can do it through interviews. And obviously the record keeping piece as well. Although, it's an after the fact. I'm much more of a what are they doing now, how are they doing it, and talking to them. So we spend a lot of time training auditors around interview skills and how to get that story from the employees. Through that, we can see employee empowerment and whatever evidence of continuous improvement. That should be something that's easily measured, easily shown. As auditors go back a couple times to the same site, they can see that as well. They're looking for that. One of the things, the best way to do that is to say how have they managed change. So when I was an auditor, the first thing if I was going back to a plant for a second or third time, the first thing I always talked about to management and the team was what's changed. And if the answer over a year has been nothing, my spidey senses would go up, and I'm thinking, okay, that's not really possible in a food plant. There's always change going on. How you adjust to that change, that's that adaptability piece is crucial to understanding if you understand how to control risks and when they happen, what you're doing about them. So that's what auditors are looking for. So what do you get out of this? What do your sites? Some of you may be certified, some of you not. I hope you do consider the SQF model. All of this is about risk reduction, right? CEOs, plant owners, they take a risk when they start a business or manage a business. We all do. They want to be able to control that risk in a certain way, and obviously food safety is a risk. It's there for any food plant. And so if I was the CEO or I'm the plant manager, I want to know that 24/7 we're doing the best we can to reduce those risks and or control those risks. We want efficient and effective action to food safety instances. Efficient and effective so that they don't happen again. So how we do that, how we record it, what do we learn from that is important pieces. We want an engaged workforce. Hey, if they're engaged and they're working hard, our numbers are going to go up, our efficiencies are going to go up, they're going to be happy. They're contributing. It's an important part. So the food safety culture can go a long way to having an engaged workforce. We gain trust with their customers and consumers. Okay, we're selling products. You're selling a food ingredient or a finished product. You want them to trust it. You want to trust it from a quality perspective and from a food safety perspective. That's what they're buying. That's what they're paying for. And so you get the benefit of earning that trust and keeping that business. And then it meets and exceeds regulatory and legal requirements. That's what the SQF code minimally must meet regulatory and legal requirements. But if you execute on it and learn from it and show continuous improvement, you're going to exceed those requirements and get back to improving that trust with your customers and your consumers. So in summary, food safety culture. It may be complete and whole at company startup. So sometimes you start a company, hires employees, it's built right into what you do and how you do that. Sometimes it may take years to mature. If you're starting now and you're trying to get an handle on that, sometimes you can make that change happen. Sometimes, depending on the size and the complexity of the organization, they can take a long time. It is shared via education and conversation. So we talked about that. Messaging is so important. It is reinforced through thought and action until it rests in the unconscious of all employees. These sort of bullet points come directly from that GFSI white paper. At the bottom of that page, you can see a link to that white paper that talks and outlines a lot of what was discussed here today, a lot more detail as well, some great appendices, a great glossary of resources and books and white papers on food safety culture. So we encourage you all to go to that library. It's a little that particular link is gets you to a search engine. So put in culture, you should be able to find it from there. It's not a direct link, but you just have to go to that link to get to the search engine. So we encourage you to do that. So that's right on. It's almost 2 o'clock. So if we have any other questions, be glad to entertain them for you right now.
Perfect. Thank you, Frank. We'll wait just a couple more seconds for any questions to come up. And one thing I know about Frank, and I said this in the last webinar for people who were on the last webinar, is Frank is very responsive to email or to phone call. I joked last time that even when I was a competitor and had to call him for stuff that I needed for Azul, he would respond very quickly. So he's very good at that. In fact, Frank, did anybody contact you from last webinar?
No, not that I've seen. So
okay.
Not
but if you have any questions or anything like that, just you can follow up with him directly, or you can also follow up with me. Many of you have received emails from me. So you just email matt.rigucci@trainedtocomply.com or matt.rigucci@wqscert.com, and you'll be able to get a hold of me as well. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So tomorrow morning, you will receive a link from Webinar Jam where you can replay this performance at any time. I will be posting this on YouTube as well by tomorrow morning, and I'll be posting the other one that we did last week on YouTube as well by tomorrow morning. And so you'll be able to view it on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to send it also to the marketing person at SQF. She and I have been in contact, and I think they'll be uploading this to SQF as well. I think you guys have your own YouTube channel. So
we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So you'll be able to view this at any time on YouTube as well. All right. Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure, Frank. It was awesome. If you have anything you want to talk about, please let us know. We would love to have you back. You're a great presenter. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, man.
Bye.